Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hens. We're talking tonight about suicide, and I want to just start by saying suicide, of course, is, I think most of us know, a major national public health issue across the world, but here in the United States for sure. And due to the stigma surrounding suicide, it is suspected that suicide is usually underreported. But here are some numbers that we do have. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, leading causes of death reports from 2019, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death overall in the United States. It claimed the lives of about 47,500 people. It was the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34, and the fourth leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 35 and 44. And there were nearly 2.5 times as many suicides in the United States as there were homicides in 2019. So some really sad numbers, sad loss of life. And to talk about suicide, suicide awareness, suicide prevention, we are very pleased to have on the show tonight Sarah Danahy. You've never been here before.
I've never been here.
You are the Executive Director of Community for Hope here in the Oshkosh area. We've had other folks from Community for Hope on in the past, but not you. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Wanted to have you on last year, but everyone was secluded and quarantined.
That whole pandemic thing that was happening. Yeah, I think we met right in the middle of the pandemic, actually.
Yeah, met on the phone because I interviewed you for a couple of different articles that I was writing for different publications, and I said, I want to have you on my show, and here we are.
I'm really happy to be here.
See, I keep my word.
Yes, you do.
So let's first, in case no one's familiar with Community for Hope, let's talk a little bit about what the organization is, who it serves, what you guys do, if there's a cost. Tell us the what.
Sure. So Community for Hope has been around for 20 years. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow.
So 20 years in the Oshkosh community and serving all of Winnebago County. But our 20th anniversary represents a time in 2001 where there were a string of adolescent suicides in Oshkosh. And so the community got together, providers, parents, and they started meeting and decided that this could not ever happen again. So they formed Community for Hope and really focused at that time on student suicides, and they were in the schools, something called the Yellow Ribbon Campaign, where they were raising awareness. Throughout the 20 years, obviously the focus has changed as our community has evolved. So we now focus on prevention and postvention. So prevention meaning we offer free community trainings. The most common evidence-based training we provide is called QPR. It is question, persuade, refer. And actually, I had the privilege of being in Appleton today, where our master trainer for this area trained 20 new trainers from the Oshkosh Area School District, Appleton School District, NAMI, Lawrence University. And so now they will go out and provide this training. We're really proud that between a variety of providers in the area, we've trained over 10,000 people in QPR in the last 10 years. So,
in the last 10?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
10,000. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an average of 1,000 a year.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I want to talk more about that QPR as we get a little further into this. How are you guys funded?
So we are funded 100% from grants, donations, fundraising, and foundations. So we're very fortunate that Oshkosh and Winnebago County is a very generous community. And so with the help of the JEK Foundation, the John E. Kenzel Foundation, and J.J. Keller, some other individuals who have just been very generous. But really, to be honest, we are very thankful for the $10 donation, the $5 donation.
Yeah, they all add up.
Absolutely. And the best donation, we always say when people ask us, how can we volunteer? How can we help out? the best way to volunteer is to talk about suicide, to have me on the show, to talk to other people and start that conversation is the best way that you can help our agency.
Sure. So when you focus on prevention and postvention, did I get that right?
You did.
Postvention?
Yep.
So prevention, of course, we all know what that would look like, and we'll talk some about that. But what does postvention? Are you then talking with families who are survivors of suicide? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We actually have I'm really excited because just this month we started a collaboration with the Winnebago County Coroner's Office and the Public Health Department. So what we've started with the county, really, the Coroner's Office, Winnebago County, is really ahead of its time. I mean, they are really a model for how coroner offices should be functioning, in my opinion, and their communication level with public agencies, nonprofits, and public health. We have a great relationship with them. When someone dies by suicide in Winnebago County, the coroner's office will contact me and let me know that there's been a death by suicide. At that point, then I have a process where I reach out to the family. I always have. I send a card. I reach out to them, offer them support. I inform them about our grief support groups that we have twice a month for survivors of suicide loss. And then now what I'll be doing is then I will be asking the family to voluntarily meet with me. And then I will complete what's called the suicide investigation form. It sounds kind of icky. I'm trying to think of a new name for it. I don't know. But where I will ask the family more in-depth questions. Education level, was the individual in counseling? Is there a family history of mental health issues? Were there previous attempts? Was there substance use? So that we can kind of gain a better understanding of these individuals. And then what we'd like to do is meet quarterly with public health and other individuals and review all of the data so that we can efficiently and directly figure out where the gaps are, what are the patterns, and where we need to put our focus. So for me, this is really exciting because we're not just basing our efforts on research, national research or even statewide. We're looking at our county data.
Under a microscope.
Under a microscope.
Focusing in on what we here in this county are experiencing.
Yes. Yeah.
And do you find that is different, inherently different from what we see on a national basis or even a statewide basis?
I think our county and our state in general is different. We have most suicides are completed using firearms. In Wisconsin, we generally own more firearms in the state, and in rural areas, especially Winnebago County, there's definitely a higher firearm percentage. And I think the other things we need to think about are our special populations. So farmers in this area in Wisconsin experience more economic hardship at times, isolation, and so we want to focus on our farmers where they're probably not focusing on farmers in Los Angeles per se. But I think our data is different here.
Okay. It's funny, I never gave any thought to farmers, really. I know that, among law enforcement personnel, EMSs, even veterinarians.
Yes.
We're both dog lovers.
Yes, we are.
And dog owners. But even veterinarians, people who are dealing with some of those tragedies, end-of-life decisions when it comes with pets, some of the things that veterinarians are seeing, they have high rates of suicide as well.
Absolutely.
And veterinarians as well as veterans. And I have a little bit later on, I want to talk some about veterinarians. I want to talk about veterans.
Veterans, yes.
We've talked about veterinarians enough right now. And I always have to, I saw something the other day. It said their daughter is a vet, and I thought, now wait a minute, does that mean
which one?
Yeah, does that mean she's a veterinarian, or does that mean she's a veteran? And I had to ask the question because I didn't know. So you know, so you get these suicide numbers from our local coroner.
Yes.
And what did that picture look like, Sarah, in not just 2020, but during the entire time of the pandemic, which we're still in?
Yep, absolutely. So surprisingly, our suicide numbers in Winnebago County have declined. In 2019, we had 26 suicides. In 2020, we had 25. And so far this year, as of today, we have had 15.
Wow.
So, although we believe that one is too many, we are seeing a trend of decline numbers.
That's surprising to me. I guess because there were so many people who were out of work for so long. Yes, the federal government kicked in with a lot of help financially, but it can never take the place, well, I shouldn't say never, but it can oftentimes not take the place of what that income level was prior to the pandemic. And so, and then you've got family members kind of quarantined all together, spending a lot more time together than they have probably in the last several years, you know, if you think about it. And it seems to me anyway that those factors combined with a lot of other things would just cause people to kind of get on each other's nerves, start feeling really depressed, and sort of forlorn about everything going on, not just in their home and lives, but hearing all the death statistics every night on the news. I mean, there for a while you couldn't turn on any television anywhere without seeing or hearing something about the pandemic, the loss of life and that kind of thing. So it's surprising to me that numbers went down.
The only thing that I think of, and again, this is not based on any clinical research, but my hunch is that a lot of the issues that we're seeing now with mental health and the increase in mental health calls, those issues were there before the pandemic. You know, the pandemic really shined a light on a lot of things that I think we just kind of chose to ignore and just kind of bury our heads in the sand. So I think what happened is that, we did start spending a lot more time together. That wasn't always a terrible thing, because what I saw is, you know, I heard my colleagues say, we're seeing an increase in adolescents coming in for mental health treatment. I'm diagnosing depression, and pediatricians are prescribing meds, and you know, it's just, you know, skyrocketing. Oh, I believe that's because parents were paying attention.
They were more tuned in.
They were more tuned in.
Yeah.
Kids weren't, you know, at sporting events and at their part-time jobs and out with their friends, and you know, there was nothing to do, so they were home, right? So I think parents started to tune in a little bit more, pay attention, and so I'm hoping that led to more people seeking treatment. And yes, the pandemic had a negative effect on mental health, but again, I really believe, and also being a licensed clinical social worker, I know that a lot of those issues were there pre-pandemic, and they're going to be there post-pandemic too.
Sure. Yeah.
The other thing I think is that maybe one silver lining of the pandemic is that we all started to kind of talk about mental health a little bit more. We talked about isolation. We talked about checking in with each other, checking in with your neighbors, and we were Zooming. And I mean, I spent more time with some of my in-laws on Zoom during the pandemic than I had in years.
Yeah.
You know, so I actually connected with family that I really hadn't in a long time. So maybe we put a little bit more focus on checking in with each other, and so maybe people felt a little bit more supported.
Yeah, and you know, I think too, when you talk about that, I think also, you know, we as a nation seem to, I think, come together when there's a tragedy of some kind. I mean, look at what happened right after 9/11. You know, and I've noticed also that during holidays, people have this wonderful attitude toward their fellow man.
Right.
And I often wonder, geez, you know, why can't people just treat people like that all the time?
All the time.
You know, I don't, as a social worker, do you have any thoughts on that as to why? I mean, is
How
it
much
just,
time do you have?
well, I mean, because it's that's depressing to me.
Yeah.
You know, that people treat people so well during those kinds of times, and so deplorably other times.
Yeah, I really have a hard time. I struggle with wanting to save the world and figure out how do we turn this around, because unfortunately I feel like the pandemic also divided us in a lot of ways, and so that can be really frustrating. But I really hope that I have noticed, and maybe this gives me hope for the future, kids really stepping up. I mean, my Facebook feed, although everyone tells me I need to get off Facebook, but I can't. It's like impossible. But my Facebook feed is flooded with kids in elementary doing really great things. You know, the Oshkosh Police Department, their Facebook page is full of people. Thanks for the donation of cookies. Thanks for stopping in, with a donation for this. I'm seeing kids donate instead of birthday gifts, they're making a donation to the Humane Society. I mean, I really think that the pandemic, brought out the best in some people and the worst in others. So,
yeah, I think it did too. You know, if there has to be something like a pandemic, and who thought we'd ever see something like this in our lifetime?
I know.
Really,
I know. Yeah.
But if there has to be something like that, then it's kind of the yin-yang thing kind of thing.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to find a silver lining there someplace. And I think you're absolutely correct that with families spending more time together, sharing meals together, doing whatever they were doing together, those are good things. And I just hope that when this is all said and done and in the rearview mirror for us, that those kinds of things can continue.
I hope so.
And I hope it doesn't just sort of fade away. Of those who've committed suicide, do you have a breakdown in age, gender, the manner in which they took their lives? And I've seen this before, so I wasn't shocked, but I'm always a little surprised, I guess, still, by the fact that, guns are the way that most people commit suicide, because that's a messy way to die.
Yep. It's not pleasant.
Yeah, and you're always running the risk that, I've heard, not to get too graphic, but I've heard of people who they've not done it quite right, so they've not been completely successful. And they've ended up with major brain trauma and injuries. And, then that adds a whole nother element to what that family has to deal with. But boy, when they're successful, it's still very messy.
Yep, absolutely. In 2020, out of the 25 suicides, 23 were men.
Wow. 23 of 25.
Yes. The fastest growing group of individuals dying by suicide are middle-aged white men. So that currently, when I talked about how 20 years ago we started with focusing on teens and students, our focus really in the last 5 years has shifted to middle-aged white men. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Lack of willingness to reach out for help, fewer physical checkups with their doctors, so less opportunities to be asked about mental health. The stress of work, pandemic, economic issues, family issues, substance use are all reasons. But middle-aged white men, we're really trying to reach out to that particular population.
And what are you doing to reach out to them? How are you doing that?
We actually worked with the Mental Health Connection, the new Mental Health Connection in the Fox Cities, and some other agencies, organizations got together, and we created a campaign, Strong Minds for Men. And if you go onto any of your search engines and Google Strong Minds for Men, the number 4 men, it will take you to a website that is specially designed for middle-aged white men My poor husband was a guinea pig because he is a middle-aged white man. And so as we were doing this website and creating the content and even the pictures and the messages, I would say, you know, this one or that one, this one or that one. What does this one say to you? Do you like this one? How do you feel about this? And so we really got input from a variety of people to make sure that the message was positive and directed at the right population.
So is Strong Minds the number 4 men, and is that .org, .com?
You know, I apologize. That was probably one thing I should have brought. I didn't, but I think if you Google that, it'll bring you to where you need to go. The New Mental Health Connection also, and our website, communityforhope.org, has it.
Okay. So is that something that's just a local thing, or is this a nationwide push?
No, that's excuse me, that's actually a local Fox cities, so Calumet, Outagamie, and Winnebago County,
Okay.
Tri-County, and so we'll have local resources for therapists, different checkups, you know, online evaluations. We call it a mental health checkup, and
that could be kind of fun.
yeah, and some different activities, resources, links to other supports and resources.
Yeah. I mean, I say that could be kind of fun because I think a lot of people, they like to take these little online tests
Yeah.
and quizzes and things like that.
Yeah, and you can do it on your phone. You know, no one has to know that you're.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you guys have devised it in a way that it looks fun and it's not all doom and gloom and that kind of thing. And it, you know, the end result is it may point to something that maybe someone hadn't really
Absolutely,
thought about.
absolutely.
Wow, 23 of 25 men. That kind of blows me away, really.
Yep.
But I'm still trying to get over the, you know, the handgun thing. That just, because to me, it seems like it would be much simpler, although not as fast, to just either take a bunch of pills or sit in a car and just let the motor run. And you know my situation. I've shared it on this show a number of times that, you know, I had 2 people in my life commit suicide 2.5 weeks apart from each other. And both were done in a car. And one was a man and one was my mother. And, you know, so to me, I don't know, that's a painless way of doing it, you know, you just kind of go to sleep. And yet, I can also see that that's got to be a little bit, I don't know, a little bit stressful, sitting there wondering when your next breath is coming.
Right. And the thing is, when someone, you know, decides to take their own life, their only thought is to end the emotional and mental pain that they're in. And so I'm not sure that the method is always, you know, as important as the fact that they felt like there was no other option, you know. So.
You know, there's TV commercials out there, at least in this area. I don't know about other parts of the country. And I always mention that because this is on YouTube and so people can watch it from anywhere. But here locally anyway, we have for a number of years now seen commercials where victims of, you know, survivors who had a loved one who committed suicide. They're there showing their loved one's photo. Or in one case in particular, several photos of the young man. And the point that they always try to drive home is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I think that that is so true in any case, really. But you know, if someone has mental health issues, is that really a temporary situation? You know, as a social worker, do you find that to be temporary? Or can someone suffering from mental health actually get help and move forward with no longer having a mental health issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody with a mental health illness or challenge can certainly enter what we call recovery. And so I'm very open myself with my clients too, that I have anxiety and depression, and I sometimes think of it as similar to having allergies, right? Where I may have there's certain time of year where your allergies are worse than others.
Yeah.
I have certain times of year that my anxiety and depression is worse. I have certain days where my anxiety might be worse. My illness hasn't gone away, but how I manage it has changed. And so absolutely what we tell people, especially when we teach QPR, is that anybody who reaches out for help, we can prevent suicide that way by asking the question. Okay. By you and I maybe are having lunch and you're telling me that, gosh, things have been really bad and I've been crying a lot, and we start talking and I'm going to ask you, have you thought about killing yourself?
That's when you bring up that question, Sarah. One of the things that I've always read and heard, and the first time I heard it may have actually been from someone from Community for Hope who was on years ago. But they always said, you don't say to someone, you're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you?
Correct.
Explain for us, because I don't remember why, and for people who have never heard that expression before, that we shouldn't say that.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Sure. So you don't want to add a judgment or give your opinion about something in the question. So if I say to you, you're not thinking about doing something stupid, are you? You're only going to answer that one way, and that's the way that I want you to answer it because it makes me feel better. Okay. And it's less scary for me asking the question. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask the question directly. One, because they're uncomfortable saying the word or just asking the question. Or two, they're afraid, what do I do next? What if they say yes? And then what do I do? It's a scary topic. So it's always best to ask directly. There are indirect ways to ask as well, but we always want to try to avoid interjecting a judgment or an opinion one way or the other.
Well, and to them it may not be stupid. There's
Correct.
The other side of it.
Which is tough, especially when we're talking about teens, because, a 15-year-old, breaking up with a boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other is devastating. To a 42-year-old, I'm like, been there, done that. You're going to get over it. It's going to be fine. But that doesn't matter because that's not where that person's at right now.
Yeah. You talk about that, and my mind immediately went to, it's a commercial for, I think, being a foster parent or something. But my mind immediately went to the commercial where the girl is all upset because she's broken up with a boyfriend, and she's got all these pictures and everything, and she says, he's tagged and I've got so many tags of him or something to that effect. And the mom says, well, I can cut out tags. But it's not that kind of tag.
Right.
So,
right.
But I see what you're saying.
Figuring out where they're at. Yeah. So not, and not using slang and not, but just being as direct as possible.
So, let's talk about the QPR because, did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Think of CPR.
QPR.
We're QPR.
All right. Question, persuade, refer.
Yes.
So this is some actual training that you guys provide?
Yes. So this is a training that we offer for free to anyone in the community. I just, before I came here tonight, have an email from UWO nursing program. I train their students throughout the year. It's a 90-minute evidence-based training, and it covers the basics. So recognizing the signs of suicide and talking about the different statistics in our area as well as nationally, and then talking about how to ask the question appropriately, then how to persuade the person to get help, and then where to refer them and how to refer them.
So how would someone, if they're interested, how would they go about learning more about this, signing up for it? How often is the training held?
Sure.
Like if they can't do it this time, do you have it several times throughout the year? And how long is the training?
Sure. So before the pandemic, we offered it at least once every other month. And then the pandemic hit and we kind of were like, what do we do? So We haven't provided very many in person recently, but my plan is to hold our first in-person training in December in Oshkosh, and that will be on our website, that will be on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of our social media. Anybody that would like to have a training, whether it's a faith-based group, it could be like a mom's group, it could be a book club, it could be a soccer club, it could be anyone who wants to have a training, would just need to email me or contact me somehow on Facebook or through our website, and we go ahead from there and schedule it.
Okay. And is it just a one-day training?
It's 90 minutes.
90 minutes?
90
okay.
minutes, yep.
All right. Well,
Yep.
that's not long at all.
Not long at all.
But I bet you hit on all the very salient points that
Yes,
need to be
yes,
hit.
it's a very effective training. In fact, we survey people who have taken the training usually about 3 months afterwards, and we get really positive feedback from people. It's important. We train, so for example, I helped someone train Winnebago County Sheriff's deputies last week. And what I tried to communicate to them is, yes, you're going to use this in your professional life, but you're going to use this in your personal life too. You're going to be sitting at a Thanksgiving, get together with your family, and your cousin's going to say something that you're going to go, huh, and you might start that conversation and you might save a life. I mean, being trained in QPR, you can and will likely save someone's life.
So the first in-person training is coming up in December.
It'll be in December, yeah.
Okay, and people can just find that out by going to the
Yes, it will be.
communityforhope.org
Yes.
website.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's something that is well worth, and especially when you say only 90 minutes, it's not like you're expecting someone to make a commitment of, once a week for 6 weeks or something
Right.
like that.
And you don't
So-
have to have any sort of professional background in mental health or anything. I mean, this is really tailored for the average person,
Yeah.
no experience necessary.
Excellent. When we talk about suicide, are they usually successful in completing on the first try? Or do they think about this for a while and they're not quite sure? Do they maybe think in their heads, how would I do this? How's the best way for me to do this? And do they attempt it several times
Yeah,
before
so
they actually complete?
people who attempt suicide are more likely to attempt in the future. However, and there's a couple ways to think about this. Most people who die by suicide have a mental health condition, but not everybody who has a mental health diagnosis is suicidal or is going to die by suicide. So it's important to remember that, because I think sometimes, especially if we hear, a suicide in the public or a celebrity, there's all these kind of assumptions, and they're not always necessarily true. Most people think about suicide multiple times before they actually attempt. And I don't know specifically offhand the number of attempts, but very often there are other attempts before. However, just offhand, if I'm thinking about this year's data, I don't believe that there were any previous attempts from the 15 this year.
Interesting. What about, I'm thinking about kids now, and I realize that is not part of this 23 of 25 who are, middle-aged white men, but kids today are just under so much pressure. The bullying. Once a month I get together with people that I went to high school with, and we go out for dinner and have a couple drinks, and we've talked about how when we were in school, we had bullies. I don't think you can go through any walk in life anywhere and not come across a bully of one kind or another.
Okay.
But at the end of the school day, you were at home, and you were playing with your friends and being with your family, and you could get away from it. But kids today, they can't get away from it.
Nope.
Because they're on their phones, they're involved in social media, and so they can be bullied in a lot of different ways, and bullies can just reach right through the phone, right into your home, and bully your kid. How much of a factor does bullying play in with kids who are committing suicide these days?
I don't know if it's so much bullying. It definitely plays a role, but social media in general to me is the bully. Thank the Lord there was no social media when I graduated high school. Let me just say, I am thankful all the time that there is no Facebook evidence of some of the stupid decisions I made in high school or before. So kids nowadays really can't get away with anything, right? Every little thing they do is captured and put out there. So yes, it's bullying, but it's also the idea that, we talk about kids and say, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how you learn. But in this age of social media, every mistake you make is thrown back at your face. It's not like you could make a mistake at school. Maybe you got into a fight with someone or whatever. But yeah, then you went home and you hung out with your family and you went to soccer practice and whatever. Now it follows them. Yeah. So mistakes aren't easily erased anymore.
See, and the people who are putting it out there, they're the bullies.
Correct.
Correct. They are the bullies. Mm-hmm. And so I see what you mean about it being that social media is the bully. I kind of take a little bit different thought to it, and I think, okay, social media is the vehicle that these bullies are using to bully these kids.
Absolutely.
For whatever reason it may be. It's just like when we were in school, we were always told, and I still believe this, there is no such thing as a dumb question. And yet, kids will make fun of other kids because, you're asking a stupid question or whatever. I want to switch gears here just a moment and talk about mental health in general, because we have far too many mental health issues in this country.
Yes, we do.
And, if we would just start allocating money toward mental health funding and stop some of this other silliness that the government is spending money on, you're never going to get rid of all the mental illness in this country. But boy, we could sure make a hell of a dent in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what do we need to do here, Sarah? I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball here.
I know.
But where do we even start with this? And if we don't have the funds, well, we have the funds. If we don't use the funds for the right things,
correct.
What can we then do as just Sarah Danahy and Cheryl Hentz? What can we do to help, make a dent, even so tiny,
absolutely,
in the mental health problem?
I think the mental health problem is so layered and so complex that just focusing on mental health and mental health services is putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Oh, you lost your microphone.
I did lose my microphone. Somebody was pointing at me, and I'm like, what does he want? And I don't even know how long I've not had it.
Well.
I hope not long.
Yeah, well.
Good thing my voice carries. Right.
So the mental health problem, the mental health crisis, you can look at the minimum wage issue. We can look at, maternity and paternity leave for parents. We can look at what's happening in our schools. The list goes on and on and on for where we could start with this. In my opinion, and what I've always learned, and even when I was a baby social worker working in Wayne County, Detroit, it was prevention. So I would much rather focus and spend my money here than wait till we get down the road and the problem is 10 times bigger. So where I started my career was working with Head Start programs and working in programs called infant mental health. So working with pregnant moms who were at risk for mental health issues, helping them understand, educate, teaching them mental health coping skills. When that baby was born, then we just kept going and taught them how to do baby infant massage and how to, bond with their babies. That's where you start if you really want to get to how to prevent and fix the mental health system. But there are so many layers in funding. With funding also comes a lot of red tape.
Yeah, I suppose.
And pretty, strict rules and not always the most helpful. But, pay mental health therapists more. There's a shortage of mental health
I
providers.
was just going to ask, is there a shortage? Because
There's
I
a
know at one
shortage.
time there was. Has it gotten worse in like the last 5 years or so?
I don't know that it's gotten worse. I mean, I know that many of my colleagues who worked for larger organizations have now gone into private practice, which is what I did, and one of the best decisions I ever made. So there are plenty of therapists out there, but there's just a lot of barriers for people. Individuals who have Medicare insurance can only be seen by a licensed clinical social worker. They can't be seen by a professional counselor or a psychologist unless they're a PhD.
Wow,
So
interesting.
certain things like that really create a barrier.
And you said Medicare, not Medicaid.
Not Medicaid. Medicare.
Well,
Yeah, there's all there. We could go on and on and on. There's all kinds. Yeah.
I just kind of chuckle because, first of all, that's ridiculous. But I also chuckle about the Medicare thing because I can't even get away from Medicare. Thanks a lot. I can't even get away from it here. I'm like 5 or 6 months away from turning 65, and I am getting so many things in the mail about Medicare this, Medicare that.
It's overwhelming.
It is.
It's overwhelming.
And I honestly, I'm so overwhelmed, so confused that, you don't know what to pick.
You don't know what you don't know.
Well, but I will say this. I went to the county and they said, go to a few seminars that these places
have
are
them,
offering.
yeah.
And they're not allowed by law to high pressure you. They can't
Right.
pressure you in any way. But learn what these different companies are offering. But
absolutely.
so that's another whole
Yeah,
topic.
no, there's
But
lots of red tape, but I'm all about prevention. Anywhere that we can, prevent something, to me is the best.
I want to also mention that, and I'm not getting on my soapbox here, but I have a little thing to say. There's a certain stigma that's attached to suicide and calling for suicide prevention help and that kind of thing. The government for a couple of years now has been talking about rolling out a 3-digit number, and it's going to be 988, and it'll be much like we use 911 for emergencies and so forth. I don't know how close they are to rolling this number out. However, because they're rolling it out and in anticipation of this at some point, starting October 24th, and we're taping this on October 21st, those of us here in Winnebago County, even if you're just calling your neighbor across the street or your brother or sister across town or your parent or whatever, no matter where these people are, if you live in Winnebago County, you must, starting October 24th, use the area code as well. You don't have to dial 1, but you must dial 920 in front of their number. And I think that's going to take some people some getting used to. I think with cell phones, it's kind of an automatic thing, but you may want to go through your phone and make sure that, that those numbers are entered in that way. Otherwise, you're not going to, those calls, I guess, won't go through. So that gives me some hope that the 988 number will be rolled out soon. As a social worker, do you know, have you gotten any information about when the federal government anticipates? Okay, none. All right, I won't even finish asking the question. But it will eventually be 988.
Yes.
And if anyone out there wants more information about this 10-digit dialing, because it's not going to affect everybody. It's certain counties in certain states, but you can just go to fcc.gov, and it's right there on their homepage, 10-digit dialing. Getting back to this then, what's the difference between someone being depressed for just a little while and being depressed to the point where they may truly have a mental health diagnosis in their future, and we need to be mindful of the fact that there may be some suicide thoughts?
Yeah, this comes up a lot because sometimes people will say, well, there are times when I feel depressed, or I'm feeling sad, but I don't need to be on medication, or I don't need to go talk to a therapist. We all experience anxiety, depression on a spectrum, and it does not become a diagnosable condition until it begins to interfere with your daily life. So when it starts to interfere with your activities of daily living, so your sleep, your eating, being able to get to work or school, being able to maintain a relationship, hygiene issues. So when it starts to interfere and have an impact on those parts of your life, that's usually when I would suggest somebody reach out. Maybe start with their primary care doctor, or just call their insurance and say, who are some mental health therapists in my area. And then that diagnosis, a therapist would make that diagnosis.
Okay.
Some of the signs that we look at, they vary depending on the age of the individual, but if we're talking about middle-aged white men, for example, some of the signs you would maybe start to notice is isolation or a lack of interest in things that they used to enjoy doing. So maybe your brother is an avid hunter and he goes hunting every year and he looks forward to it, and all of a sudden he says, no, I'm not going this year. Well, why not? I just don't feel like going. If it's out of the norm, if it's something that makes you go, that's unusual, it's definitely worth having a conversation. Somebody who's extremely irritable all of a sudden, hasn't been, and then all of a sudden they are, screaming about something that in the past wouldn't have been a big deal. That can be a sign that maybe something's going on.
Okay. All right. And you must have been looking at my paper because that was my next question. So if someone tells us, and this kind of goes back, I guess, to the QPR thing, but if someone tells us that, yeah, they've been thinking about suicide, or they just feel like it, maybe they suffer from chronic pain and they're just flat out tired of dealing with pain day in and day out. They can't get management of it. They can't get a handle on it. And gosh, wouldn't it be just so much easier if I just wasn't here? I mean, that's a lot for someone to be hit with. How do we approach someone who tells us something like that?
Absolutely. So the important thing to remember is that it's not, if I ask you that question and you hit me with all of that, it doesn't become my responsibility to fix it all. And I think sometimes that's the fear, is that when we get that and we go, oh my gosh, I have to fix all of that. And that's absolutely not. Honestly, the most important thing that someone can do is just sit with that person and be with them, hold that space for them, and rather than impulsively jump and try to fix everything, to just sit with them. I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. What can I do to help? How can I help you right now? And just sit with that person and listen, not judge them. And then consider connecting them with someone that they trust, whether it's you, whether it's a pastor, a friend, a coworker, someone, and say, would it be okay with you if we called this person and let them know what was going on? Would it be okay if I called your mom or your dad and let them know what was going on? Would you consider maybe going to the emergency room if you feel it's that serious? And can I go with you? What if I went with you?
I've never heard of that before,
room.
going to the ER. Do people actually do that?
So if you feel that someone is really at high risk of hurting themselves and you don't feel safe leaving them alone, it's certainly okay to go to the emergency room and have them evaluated. And then there are social workers at the emergency room who will evaluate that person to determine if they're a risk to themselves and whether they should be admitted.
What if they don't want to go, though?
Well, if they don't want to go, then you can't take them. You can't make them.
I've never heard of that before. That's an interesting option for sure. Can all suicides be prevented, do you think? I know we would like to think so, but I'm not sure that that's realistic. So I'm looking to the expert.
This is a conflicting. I'm conflicted about it, but yes, I believe that all suicides can be prevented. I really do. I don't believe that they will all be prevented, but I do believe that in 100% of the circumstances, if someone there are always signs. That doesn't mean we always see them. Doesn't mean we always recognize them. But I do believe that if we were to all feel comfortable asking the question, really spending time with people and being mindful and holding that space, I do believe that we can prevent all suicides.
That's a really positive thought.
Yeah.
This is why your organization's called Community for Hope.
Lots of hope.
Hope is endless.
Lots of hope.
I would like to think that also, but it's interesting because we have so many laws in this country that protect our privacy.
Yes.
And yet, by the same token, every single time that there's a mass shooting, we hear people say, well, he seemed kind of weird. He was a strange dude. He was this, he was that, or she was this, or she was that. And, you'll hear someone say, I called the police. I told them that they should be, looking into this individual. There's part of the problem, though.
Yeah, there are limits to what we can do. Me as a therapist, if I just had this conversation with someone earlier, if I have someone sitting in my office and they tell me that they're thinking about killing themselves, and I say, well, as your therapist, I'm legally obligated and ethically obligated to have you go to the emergency room to be evaluated. And no, I refuse to go. Well, I still think you need to go. Now I'm going to call the police to come so that you can be escorted to the emergency room because I'm that concerned. The police come and the person says, no, I changed my mind. I'm okay. No, really, I'm okay. The police leave, and that client goes home. There are limits. Now, yes, there are circumstances where you can petition to have someone involuntarily placed into a mental health facility. It's very rare and it's very difficult to do. There are definitely limits to what can be done. And I've had this conversation, I think, with my own mother one time about, well, if someone knew that about them, why couldn't someone do something? We don't have institutions anymore. We don't institutionalize people. We don't just lock them up and put them away. There are limits to what we can do.
Well, and again, there are laws. There are HIPAA laws that prevent a lot of information from being given out, even to one's spouse or significant other. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because you've got these laws to protect people, and yet those same laws that are protecting those individuals aren't protecting the mass necessarily. So it cuts both ways.
Absolutely.
If someone locally is feeling, very depressed, feeling like they may be contemplating suicide, what's the best number for them to call? Is it to call you guys at Community for Hope? Is it to call, I've got a whole list here of phone numbers that people can call.
Yep.
Where should they call?
So Community for Hope is not a crisis agency, so they would not call us. Okay. However, I had someone reach out to me today on the Community for Hope Facebook Messenger and say, I need help, and I was happy to point them in the right direction. So they can call the suicide prevention hotline. They can text the text line, the crisis text line.
Yeah. So I have two phone numbers here. I actually have a Prevent Suicide hotline, and that's a local number.
Yes.
It's 920-233-7707. And then there's another one up on the screen right now. That is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And NAMI is another. We didn't really talk about NAMI, but NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they wouldn't be a crisis intervention line, but they are someone that someone could call if they felt that they were suffering from some type of mental illness and wanted some help. So I think that, okay, do you know, is this local number still in effect, this 233-7707?
That one, I am not 100% sure on that one.
Okay, so if you call that one and don't get any answer, or it's, not a working number, call the national hotline.
Yes, the national hotline is great. Winnebago County also has a crisis team, so that's as easy as Googling Winnebago crisis mental health, and they're 24/7.
Okay.
So that's definitely.
Or 911.
911. Additionally, Oshkosh Police Department recently added a behavioral health officer to the force. So this is extremely exciting, and he's a fantastic officer, Scott Zapata. He is phenomenal, and so although he is only one, it is a great start, and so he is available if someone were to call dispatch, and they could even ask for a behavioral health officer to come out, but he monitors the calls and goes out when there's a mental health issue.
Now, I think that's a great start.
Yes.
So in a case like that, because, when George Floyd, when all this went down with him last year, people started the conversation, or started the conversation again, maybe, about, if we should defund the police, and we should, put that money into, mental health people who can go out on some of these calls with officers. And, this is a good start.
It's a great start.
But the man can't work 24/7.
He cannot work 24/7. I know his wife, and he has two beautiful daughters, so there's no way he can do that. But it's a start, and he's phenomenal, and OPD is really, really doing a good job.
Excellent. I do want to just mention one thing here in our last remaining moments. Again, be watching for that 988 number that people will be able to call starting sometime nationwide. If you are a veteran, you should call the Veterans Crisis Line, and after, when you get the number goes through and it says dial 1 for this, dial 2 for that, press number 1, and you'll get to talk to someone. And then, of course, our local hotline, federal hotline, which it was up on the screen, it's 800-SUICIDE, which is 784-2433. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This hour has flown by.
I know. I feel like we could talk for hours more.
We probably could, and I have questions to take us through that amount of time, but we'll have you back again.
Great.
So, but thank you for everything that you guys at Community Hope for doing, and also for offering this program. So again, QPR training coming up, the first one in December. It's a 90-minute training. Contact them at communityforhope.org, and they can get you set up. So thanks again.
Great.
It was nice meeting you in person.
Nice
for a
to
change,
see you in person.
and for us exchanging doggy pictures.
Yes, absolutely.
And thanks to the crew, as always. Most importantly, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.